Our next speaker is Scott Purcell, the CEO of FundAmerica and the CEO and Chief Trust Officer at Prime Trust. Known as a serial entrepreneur who's a writer, speaker, capital raiser, and we're excited to have him here today. So, Scott.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Nice to come down to Phoenix. I'm particularly fond here because the very first Reg A ever done for Reg A Plus was a Phoenix company and a customer of ours, Elio Motors. And it was really an exciting time because it kick-started the entire industry. There are broker-dealers here, there are banks here, there's a lot of activity happening here in Phoenix. I'm going to hit on some of the same points that Tom did and elaborate on them a bit. Our role with my companies, FundAmerica and Prime Trust, we provide the transaction technology, the compliance services, escrow services, funds processing, and a variety of other things for the crowdfunding industry. And in fact, we service about 50% of all Reg A's, and more importantly, about 80% of all successful Reg A's have used our services. That said, our customers are the broker-dealers, the crowdfunding portals, the platforms, and the professionals who are then working with the issuers. We rarely work with an issuer directly. But what that does is behind the scenes, it gives us a very unique perspective to be disinterested in the deals. Of course, we want to see the deals get done. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to see everybody get funded. But we see what works and what doesn't. And I think more importantly for everyone here today is the experience that we have and I have in what didn't work and why. Why did Reg A's fail? And how do you avoid those same mistakes? So my deck is way too big for this for a 30-minute segment. If you'd like it, the full deck, then please email Ryan and he will send it to you. No problem there. I'm going to hit on a number of highlights, starting with what defines a company is ready for Reg A. And forget the word mature in there. That actually shouldn't be there. And does a spectrum exist between early and late stage? What defines a company as being ready for Reg A are a number of things. And it's not the, gee, what's their sales, what's their traction, what's their market, or the things, the quantitative things that an institutional investor would typically look at in an IPO. This is crowdfunding. This is all but three Reg A's so far have relied upon the crowd for their success, not institutions. So out of all of the Reg A's that have been done, only 3 have been done completely by institutional backing. And of those, 1 or 2 of them, the institutions went in begrudgingly, not enthusiastically. So we're not seeing that momentum yet with the institution side. So it's the crowd that matters. So that said, what is a crowd interested in? Are they interested in how long you've been in business? Maybe, maybe not. Are they interested in the financial model or the revenue model of your company? Maybe, maybe not. Are they interested in the return, what they're getting? Equity or debt? Is it preferred? Is there a yield tied to it? Sure, everyone wants to know that. What is the prospects of the company? Is there a path to liquidity? Are you going to get a return on it? But in terms of the maturity of a company, we've seen a lot of startups conduct successful Reg A's. Elio Motors is a great example. XTI Aircraft is another one. These guys plan on making a vertical takeoff plane. Really cool idea. Just an idea. They have a nice video. That's all they've got. And they successfully did a Reg A. We've seen companies that have a little more traction, like ShiftPixie, and they even went up on NASDAQ, go out successfully. And they're still very early in their company's life cycle. They've got some revenue, a little bit of traction, but the technology that they're promising for their, they make technology for employee scheduling among different kinds of companies. That technology is not fully baked, is not really working yet. But they did a successful Reg A, and they were led by Hambrecht in their trading. We've seen successful companies do IPO or do Reg A's, ones that have been around for a long time. Likewise, we've also, like Fatburger and companies like that, we've also seen companies that are startups that failed trying to do a Reg A. And we've seen very successful companies. I'll pick on Sun Dental out of Atlanta. They were our first Reg A failure. Good company, big dental lab. So why couldn't a big dental lab that has a lot of revenue not to do a successful Reg A, and you've got Elio Motors do a successful Reg A, or one of my favorite customers, Brewdog, which is a brewery out of the UK that's opening some brewing facilities here in the US, and they did their first Reg A. They closed it a few months ago and raised a lot of money from over 9,000 investors. So why are those successful? What, if you're going to pull the trigger, and what defines it as the time is right in your company's life cycle? So it doesn't matter whether you're a startup, it doesn't matter if you're just really getting going as a business, it doesn't matter if you're an established business. What matters is there a crowd of people who care about your company? And you've got to have that element. The crowd has to be with you in order for you to have any shot at a Reg A. And we've seen a lot of people think, gee, I'm gonna, I've got some money. You got to have some cash, because a Reg A, the legal and accounting is going to cost you $75,000 to $100,000, depending on your law firm and things. And you've got, obviously, Manatics here, CrowdCheck is here. You've got a lot of good firms that really specialize in this sector. But you can say, okay, well, I've got to spend 75 or 100K, and they're not here for charity. They're not betting on your success. They're not going to, let you go raise money and then pay their bills. It's not how it works. Same thing with marketing. You can't just throw this at a platform like Start Engine, which is absolutely a fantastic platform, or a broker-dealer like Hambrecht or Matrix or B. Riley or some of these other ones, and say, go sell this for me, and then just sit back. You have to be an active participant in this, which means you're going to have to allocate some marketing bucks. And you're going to have to allocate a good amount of time for both the CEO and the executives, the key executives in the company, to get this done. And you're going to have to use a lot of technology. Another common problem that we've seen is companies launch their Reg A and they don't have the right technology. So when an investor goes to their website or their broker-dealer's website or their funding portal's website, they can't complete the transaction. So how easy do you make it for investors? Can they come, click a button, input their information, how they're vesting the securities, how much they're buying? Does the system automatically check whether they're an accredited or non-accredited investor? Can they then say how they're going to send money into escrow by check, by wire, by ACH, by credit card, if they're a UK firm, by BACS, all these different ways. So do you make it a frictionless single event process? And we've seen a lot of people stop that and just get an investor's name and information, and then they're going to have a broker call them, or they're going to have a representative of the company call them. And those almost always fail, because if you don't catch it when the investor is ready and you don't let them complete the transaction, your chances of failure go up about 90%. We've seen deals get 0 investor pull through on that. We've seen most get 10 to 20%. So you need the technology as well as the crowd. But that is really the key thing. So why would a company want to choose Reg A? Well, the first is obvious, because it needs capital. But that's not always the case. If I pick on, I'll pick on Elio Motors for a minute. They needed capital, absolutely. But they also needed to capture that enthusiasm and buy-in from their crowd, all the people who are pre-ordering their cars. They're looking to change the fundamentals with a really cool 3-wheeled car that has an incredible leasing model behind it. And in order to raise some capital and capture it from people, they had to use a Reg A, because they're way too young to do an IPO, an S1, a full listing, and they certainly didn't have enough money to pull that off. They had a few $100,000, they didn't have a few million. And the other is that by bringing in those customers, they get the social media effect where it radiates out and their friends tell friends who tell friends, and they wound up with somewhere north of 7,000 investors by the time they were done. BrewDog is another good example from the brewery. They're not publicly traded. They are publicly traded in the UK. They're not publicly traded in the US, and they're not going to be. They couldn't care less. Most Reg A's do not go up on NASDAQ or OTC. It's only a very few handful exceptions. Broker-dealers need it to go there because that's how a lot of times they're going to settle trades. It's what a lot of their typical clients expect. But the majority of Reg A's, 90% of Reg A's, don't go list on NASDAQ or OTC. So what that comes back to are people that are emotionally connected to the company, that want to buy in on it. And yeah, if it's a modified S11 Reg A where there's a yield, it's a real estate deal, that's one kind of play. But for most of the equity plays, which I assume is anyone here that's conducting a Reg A, you've got to have that crowd buy-in. BrewDog is very much that way. They couldn't care less about doing an IPO. They're already public. They got a $200 million investment from a private equity firm. So why do they do a Reg A? Because they want their customers in the US to walk into bars as emotionally vested participants in their company and say, hey, what do you mean you only have Bud and Coors on tap? I want BrewDog. Where's BrewDog? So it's a marketing vehicle to them. And their marketing expenses as a percentage of what they're raising are off the charts because they're not relying on it for company capital. So that's really the main reasons people are choosing Reg A, the main reasons successful people are using Reg A, to raise some money, raise capital, and to engage your crowd. If you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. The people who say, well, gee, we're going to do a Reg A because it's easier than an S1, it's less expensive than an S1, it's cheaper than an S1. We can do an IPO right now with a lot less rules. And while technically that's true, realistically that doesn't work so well. Tom showed a slide of all of the quote-unquote IPOs, all the people that have gone up to NASDAQ and what their listing price was versus what their trading price has been. There's no success stories. Elio actually was a success story. Their price went way, way up. Gave the firm $1 billion valuation and then came back down. But you're not seeing that because institutions, by and large, aren't buying Reg A's. The companies don't qualify. They're not old enough. They're not large enough. Stock price isn't high enough. They don't have the operating history. There's a lot of reasons institutions can and won't buy. The Reg A disclosures are less than what's required for a full S1. So it just precludes a lot of professional investors still from participating in this. Now you've got quite a few broker-dealers that are making some inroads and getting some institutions starting to convince them to play, but it's very, very early. So thinking that, gee, I'm going to do a Reg A because I'm going to get liquidity and we're going to start trading and this is our IPO, that is not the right way to look at it. Not yet. It could be, and hopefully will be at some point, but the market isn't mature enough about that. So it's all about your crowd. So how do you conduct an offering? How do you get this done? Well, as Tom pointed out, first step is you've got to have an attorney. And the attorney is going to have to prepare the offering memorandum, what's called the Form 1A, and file that with the SEC. And you have to get an audit. And you have to provide 2 years of audited financial institution, or financials from a CPA firm. And if you're going to go list on an exchange, it has to be a PCAOB firm. But what if you're not 2 years old? What if you're a startup? Because a lot of these companies have been. That's okay. You have to provide audited financials for as long as the company's been in business. So if you've been in business for a while, it's 2 years. If you've been in business since last month, like a lot of these REITs, then You just provide audited financials from last month. So you've got to get that done. You've got to get the legal and the accounting are the first two things. And that's, like I said, going to run you in the $75,000 range. It could be a lot more if you want to do it with a firm like Wilson Sonsini or something, or it's probably going to cost you more like $250,000. But the next thing you have to do during this process, it's a many-month process of filing with the SEC, because the SEC looks at all your disclosures, they look at all the documents, they send comments back to your attorney, you have to then review them, answer them, change things, resubmit it. It's a back and forth process. During this time, you need to be getting ready with your marketing. And you've got to get your marketing firm engaged. And you have to have a marketing firm. You know, Big Yam has definitely thrown their hat in it. They know a few things about marketing. How are you going to get to your crowd? Who is your crowd? How do you articulate your message? You have to really plan this stuff out. What's your website going to look like? What are your offering materials going to look like? When an investor comes to your website and clicks on the video, what's that? You know, you want something that's exciting and brings people in. This is all part of the planning process. Whether you want to use test the waters or not is a matter of hot debate. Test the waters where you can go out to your crowd and ask them, hey, we're thinking of doing a Reg A, and if we did it, would you buy? Some companies have successfully done that. Some have not successfully done it. The problem they've found out is you can't let the cat out of the bag twice. So if you go to your crowd, get them excited with a test the waters offering, and then you don't launch it for several months, by that time the excitement has cooled off and you've lost them. So there's two schools of thought, but rely on your marketing team for that. With the legal, with the accounting, with the marketing, you have to have, obviously you've got to your technology right. It's part of what we do through our broker-dealer and crowdfunding portal customers. And then when you launch, you really have to ramp up the marketing engine. You've got to get going. Even if you're using a broker-dealer or a platform like Start Engine or Seed Invest or Republic or whoever, the reality is they're not going to get your deal sold for you. You have to help them. They may get part of your deal sold for you, but you've got to jump in and spend a lot of time and money doing it. And then after your Reg A, you just did a public filing with the SEC. You now have ongoing reporting requirements. You're going to have to do annual audits. You're going to have to send financial statements. You're going to have your attorneys continuously engaged to file annual statements with the SEC. We've seen firms, because they're new, they're young, they're not ready to be public or to do things, miss that first year filing. And the SEC then goes in and disqualifies their deal. You have to realize that you have very important SEC obligations in doing this type of an offering. So if you're the right kind of issuer, if you're the right kind of company that's looking to raise capital in part, looking to engage your crowd in part, and not just looking for liquidity or an exit strategy, then Reg A is a really good alternative for you, because it's the only way you can allow both non-accredited and accredited investors into your company on a wide scale and market, use the internet, have a blimp circling the Super Bowl, dropping leaflets on the crowd. You can do whatever the heck you want. And there even, I'll pick on, with a Reg A, you have to have a transfer agent. I'm going to pick on ComputerShare for a minute. They've come up, you see some innovative things happening with the transfer agents as well. That's one of the other aspects that you have to have. It's not an option. You have to hire a transfer agent with your Reg A. If you go public and you sold securities to a crowd and you're on NASDAQ or OTC, how does a crowd then sell them? Oh, they have to get them into their brokerage account. Oh, gee, Fidelity won't accept securities held by that are traded on OTC, or Schwab, my Schwab account, Schwab won't accept securities in this company because they haven't been traded for a year or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why. So how does a crowd investor get public? ComputerShare came up with a very innovative tool that allows what's called DRS, direct registration. So somebody has bought securities directly through your website, not through a brokerage, having a brokerage account. They can log onto their account at the transfer agent and sell their shares. They don't have to use a brokerage firm. So it is a very innovative solution that's helped solve a very large problem within the Reg A space. And we're seeing a lot more technology innovation coming from many of the industry participants. The broker-dealers are launching platforms. We've got a broker-dealer called Matrix in New York. They've just done the very first firm commitment underwriting, and I believe it closes this afternoon or tomorrow, of a Reg A. And so that's blazing new ground, and they've done a lot of technology to make that happen. You have other broker-dealers implementing a lot of different technology. You've got crowdfunding platforms like Start Engine and Seed Invest and Republic and others throwing a lot of technology. You got the transfer agents. Of course, you have like us, the escrow agents and the compliance providers. So this is all coming together with a lot of technology to reduce friction, not necessarily to reduce costs. This is going to cost money. None of this is free, but it reduces friction, makes your life easier, makes your investors' lives easier. So yeah.
Is that now seamless with that transfer agent, so that when they come to purchase that security in that that they have a seamless event, both purchasing through the ACH or wire, and seamless to the transfer agent, so that security is transferred?
What happens at the close of the offering, then, like how we work, is at the close of the offering as the escrow agent, we've got all the investor data. We then provide that to the transfer agent. Now, some of it is direct investors, some of it might be broker-dealers and their customers who are held at RBC or Apex or different clearing firms. And we provide that information to the transfer agent. The transfer agent then communicates to the investors, and in particular the individual investors or your crowd investors, and says, hey, here's your account, here's your logon, congratulations on investing in this company, log on to see your shares, to change your address, to do whatever you need to do, including selling them.
Is it pretty accurate that 25% of these A's are going through broker-dealers?
I think that's overstated. Most of the Reg A's are still being kept private. The problem has been a lot of broker-dealers haven't gotten involved yet in the Reg A space. Often it's not because of their investment bankers. Their investment bankers are going crazy, going, oh, we got deals, we want to do this. It's their compliance people going, oh, it's Reg A, we don't know that, so let's just say no. You see that? We're seeing that a lot. But they're starting to work through it. Like I said, Matrix is doing their very first deal. We've got Dawson James teed up to do deals. Hambrick has done several deals, and they're the company that's famous for taking Google public and Overstock public and companies like that. So you have some people with some weight that are coming into this and participating, but it's embryonic.
What about the roadshow?
The roadshow,
The roadshow is primarily technology-driven by video and...
It is, but we've seen people do seminars successfully, and so they do a roadshow that way. We've seen people do institutional roadshows unsuccessfully or only nominally successfully, and you have to rely on your broker-dealer for that. But we've seen broker-dealers screaming at their clients going, this isn't going to get sold completely institutional. It's not a normal S1. This is something special. You've got to have your crowd as part of it. And we've seen companies going, no, you're going to do it all for us. Let's do a roadshow. Let's go to Fidelity, and let's go to Magellan, and let's go to the Janus and the different firms. So the reality is that's just not the way it works. The way it works, if you're going to do a roadshow, sure, maybe that's part of it, but the bulk of it is going to have to be how are you getting to your crowd? And if that's with a roadshow, great, because you're going to fill up stadiums with people and talk to them, but it's not a traditional broker-dealer-led roadshow where you jump on a jet and bounce around. We're doing time. All right, that's any other questions then? Okay. All right, appreciate it. Thanks.